E eu queria convidar para compor a mesa o presidente da Franklin Olin College of Engineering, Richard Miller. Richard Miller was appointed president and first employee of Olin College of Engineering, 1999. Previously, he served as Dean of Engineering at the University of Iowa, Associate Dean of Engineering at the USC in Los Angeles, and an Assistant Professor of Engineering in Santa Barbara. With a background in applied mechanics and current interest in innovation and higher education, Miller is the author of more than 100 reviewed journal articles and other technical publications. He received in 2017 Brock International Prize in Education. Together with two Olin Technical colleagues, he received Bernard Gordon Prize from the United States National Academy of Engineering, NAE, for innovation in engineering and technology education. Recently elected to the American Academy of Arts and Science, he is a member of both the NAE and the National Academy of Inventors. He received several awards and served as a consultant to the World Bank in the establishment of new universities in developing countries. It's just a brief idea of our professor. And I would like to ask him to initiate the conference. And thank you ever so much to accept our invitation to come.
Need to have the slides up, unfortunately. While she's putting the slides up, let me begin by saying this is not my first visit to UFMG. In fact, I spoke in this very auditorium some years ago, and I was reminded in yesterday's comments about this. One of the presenter mentioned that this university is 108 years old, if I remember correctly. On the 100th anniversary of this university, there was a celebration, and at that time, Vice President Alessandro Moreira was the Dean of Engineering, and I had an invitation to come and talk to you at that point about the creation of this new school, which was called Olin College of Engineering in those days. And I had a friend with me, David Goldberg from the University of Illinois at Urbana, and we had been working with them to help create a program in Urbana, which is called the iFoundry, which I think has been influential here at UFMG in making change. So this is not my first visit, and I'm very grateful to be back with you today. Thank you. So I want to talk with you mostly about the Grand Challenge Scholars Program, which is a really new program that I believe is important for everyone in the world to think about in terms of the purpose of engineering and the way we prepare the next generation. So that's the purpose of today's talk. But I want to begin by reviewing just a moment what was talked about yesterday by Dr. Ramakrishna, the U.S. National Academy of Engineering, which is our roots in this effort. In 2003, commissioned a study, mostly, I think, to help the public understand what engineers do. It turns out that in the press, probably everywhere, certainly in the United States, what happens is if there's a really big breakthrough that's important for the world, it's attributed to science. If there's a really big problem, there's an accident, a bunch of people died, it's attributed to engineering, okay? What can we do about this? So the U.S. National Academy of Engineering commissioned this study, what has engineering done for humanity in the 20th century? And that's what this book is that you see in the lower right-hand corner. So they documented 20 things that changed life on the planet. By the way, they reported that in 1900, the average lifespan in the United States was about 45. The most common cause of death in the United States in 1900 was waterborne disease. And then when you jump to 2000, the average lifespan is now over 75 years. So it's almost doubled the lifespan. And of course, as engineers, we claim a lot of credit for that. A lot of the things that we did changed life so profoundly that people cannot remember the way it was before, okay? And these are the kinds of things that happen. By the way, they're all things. The idea of engineering in the 20th century was you invent something in your garage, you find an entrepreneur, you start a company, and it changes the world. And it's always for the good. We have, I think, kind of a disease. I call it technological utopian belief. This is what we think. It's a naivete. Only good things can come from science and technology. This is the 20th century. This was actually pretty effective as a book for what it was written to do. Then when you look forward to the 21st century, what will such a book look like in the year 2100? So the Academy commissioned a study, a group of maybe 14, 15 people, to spend some time thinking about what are the main issues that we need to solve as a society looking at the 21st century. And you, again, seen this slide as well. This is what they came up with. In order to preserve life as we know it, we need to make these changes. We need to find solutions to these challenges. Motivated really by the philosophy that mathematicians have had, if you can prove the theorem that allows you to do X, then so many complex issues will be resolved. So let's focus on doing that. It's prioritization. These are the priorities we should look for. But these things are different. These are not things that you invent in your garage and you throw over the wall to an entrepreneur who then creates a company. These are more complicated than that. Take the very first one. Make solar energy economical. We already know how to make solar energy. We've known this for a long time. It's not taken over the world because it does not win in the marketplace. It's not competitive. So it's a societal issue. It's not just a technology thing. All of these are societal rather than just an invention. They don't all require a Nobel Prize in physics. Okay? That's not what they do. Now, as those of us who've been working with this material, the grand challenges, have discovered, these issues are not American issues. They're not Brazilian issues. They're global issues. All of us as the human family have to deal with them. And if you talk about these things in different countries, you find that the relevance of these ideas to the countries varies by the technological sophistication that's existent in that country. So if you talk about nuclear fusion in Africa, for example, you don't get the same reaction as if you talk about the need for clean water. However, if you generalize these and you put them into four basic groups, sustainability, security, health, and enhancing life, this, it turns out, touches every continent. Turns out almost every person on the planet relates to what these things mean because we're all concerned about the future. Okay, I'm going to talk to you in a minute. How do we educate the next generation to deal with this kind of problem? But I want to give you a little bit of context about where I come from and how I'm looking at this, because we have several people working on this issue, and we all come at it from a slightly different point of view. So I have this very strange background. I was the very first employee of this place called Olin College. And in fact, when I joined in 1999, Olin College was not yet a place. It was just an idea. And the college consisted of 5 people, the 4 directors of the F.W. Olin Foundation and me. Okay? By the way, none of them is an engineer, and none of them has ever worked in higher education. They have almost $500 million and they want to make change. What can go wrong with this? My wife noticed this right away. It took me a while to figure it out. The cool thing about it was, unlike any other college presidency that I know about, The primary job was not raising money. They had money. The primary job was to get the right answer. The right answer to what? To these two key questions. What does it mean to be educated in the 21st century? If you've been paying attention, there's a profound revolution that's gone on in neuroscience and in education. We know a lot more about how the brain works today than we did even 10 years ago. It's quite different than the theories that we've used in the past. What does it mean to be educated? The second question is, what does it mean to be an engineer now? In the 21st century, where these problems that were unintended consequences of the 20th century involve society, not just physics. How do you educate for that? So, the Olin Foundation created this college. They spent $460 million doing it, starting completely from scratch. That was in 1997, and they built it from the ground up. Okay, why did they do that? There had been a great deal of unhappiness about the way engineers were prepared for 25 years in the US, and no real significant change had happened. The National Science Foundation spent lots of money, over $200 million, I believe, in the 1990s, on a program, may have been 100, it's between 100 and 200, a program called the Engineering Education Coalitions Program. And here they got groups of major universities to work together to reinvent education so that we didn't lose all of the students and they would be prepared to make change in society. And 5 years later, they abandoned it because their study showed it wasn't working. Change was not happening. There was a great deal of despair. Quietly, people were saying change and higher education don't belong in the same sentence. Okay, this is like an oxymoron. It doesn't happen. When society faces a crisis that is resistant to change, our observation is usually it's because there's a problem with the basic assumptions and the basic formulation. There are some sacred issues that we are afraid to challenge because they threaten our structure, they threaten our belief and our identity. And that's the block. That's why we don't make breakthrough ideas. How do you break through this? You start over and you eliminate all of the sacred cows, okay? Take away everything that might be a roadblock to breakthrough thinking and start again. That's what Olin College did. And that's why I took the job. So if you look at the founding precepts for this school, you find that everything they did is for this purpose. It's intended to be different, not just to be different, in order to become an important and constant contributor to the advancement of engineering education in America and throughout the world. That's the idea. What does that mean? It means Olin College is intended to become an education laboratory where we can do experiments that Harvard can't do. What do you mean? We can do experiments that are designed to fail, so we can watch them fail. You can't do that at Harvard if you're taking tuition and the students are expecting to graduate. They better not fail, okay? Ideally, no one will fail. So why do we think of it this way? My background is actually in aerospace engineering. I have a number of PhD students working at major aircraft companies. No one puts a passenger in a new aircraft, like the Boeing 787, without first putting it in a hangar, put instruments all over it, and pull the wings off of it, okay? It's a very violent test. You don't want to be in the room when they do that, okay? Why did they do that? To check all the calculations. Do you really understand how it fails? Do you know what failure looks like? How do you prevent it? That's a profound way of thinking. That's what we did at Olin. We pulled the wings off of higher education to get back to the basics to find out what's wrong and what needs to be changed. So we've developed a new definition of engineering. Rama explained yesterday a number of inspiring new definitions. This is our take on what it means to be an engineer. An engineer is a person who envisions what has never been and does whatever it takes to make it happen in order to make a better world. That's the heart of engineering. It does not start with mathematics. It starts with vision, okay? And it has a purpose, and the purpose is to make a better world. If that's not what you do, we need applied scientists, we need people to do other things. That's not engineering. So as a result of that, the kind of engineer that Olin creates, we think of as engineering stem cells, okay? It's a way of thinking. No matter where they go, they bring this mentality and they make change. Along the way, we have discovered some really fundamental things about teaching and learning and about engineering. So one of the things we found out from our students, from doing experiments, is that engineering is not a body of knowledge. Is there anybody in here from the accreditation board? Okay, so I need to leave quickly, right? Now, engineering involves knowledge, don't get me wrong, but it's not fundamentally a body of knowledge. Engineering is a process. The aircraft industry was invented by people who did not have a PhD in physics, okay? They did an awful lot of experimentation. In America, I know this is Brazil, and we have a different idea of where aircraft industry was invented in Brazil, but in the US, we think of it as two bicycle mechanics in Ohio who kept jumping off of a mountain with these wings on their back, saying, there must be a better way. They make little changes, it goes a little longer, eventually the thing flies. That process, there must be a better way, let's try this, is engineering. By the way, if you're paying attention as an educator, that process absolutely engages students. They love this. This is what they were wired to do. There are two things that every child automatically does, and you don't have to teach if we just go with it. Number one, every child loves a mystery story, okay? By the way, science is a mystery story. We have ruined it by making it a bunch of facts in a test, in a book that you have to remember. If you start with what it is, it's a mystery, and you unfold this through experimentation, it enthralls students. The second thing kids love to do is make things. If you go to kindergarten, look at what they're doing, okay? If you understand that the human spirit has a fundamental need for self-expression, which is also the root of the arts, that's where engineering comes from, okay? And we should, and every kid has the need to make things and for self-expression in every year of their life. We've been inspired more by the arts than we have by the sciences in understanding how to teach engineering. So one other thing that is very simple, it's very disarmingly simple about teaching and learning. 21st century, right? Did you know that the humans are wired to learn primarily from stories? Primarily stories about people. You will remember what people tell you if it's relating to people and it's a story. This is why gossip is universal, it never goes away, this is what social media is all about. Why pretend that it's not there? By the way, you can only teach what you know. Profound insight, right? So if you want to change the way engineers turn out in the 21st century, there is no other way than to change who the faculty members are who are teaching it, because you can only teach what you know. So this is a 25-year kind of transformation. It's not something you do on Monday morning. To give you an illustration of this is a little bit risky, but I think it'll work. I'm going to tell you a story of why engineers are thought of as problem solvers and what could go wrong with that. When I grew up, I was taught that what makes me different from a physicist is I'm a problem solver, okay? Physicists think about theories. So here's this little funny story. Turns out that at the end of the French Revolution, a lot of people were guillotined, okay, who were in the resistance. This particular day, there was a group of them in line. The first person that they picked for the guillotine was a priest. They put him on the guillotine. The executioner raised the blade. He let go, and the blade came crashing down with terrible speed. And then unexpectedly, it stopped about 6 inches above his head, just stopped. No one knew what to do. This had never happened. So the priest stood up, and he pointed to the heavens, and he said, "Must be an act of God. You have to let me go." Okay? So they let him go. The next person in line was an attorney, okay, a lawyer. They put him on the guillotine, they raised the blade, they released it, It came down crashing speed and stopped 6 inches above his head. He quickly stood up and he cited the precedent that the last time this had happened, you let the person go. So you have to let me go as well. You have to follow precedent. However, the third person in line was an engineer, okay? So the engineer said, there's a problem here. Let me lay face up on the guillotine. And so they raise the blade, and suddenly he jumps up, he waves his arms, stop everything, I found the problem, okay? There's a screw in the blade up here. If you fix this, everything will work. And that's been the problem with engineers ever since. Now, you'll probably remember this story because it's about people. You see what I'm talking about? Let me ask you a question. How many in this room have a degree in engineering? Is there anybody who doesn't? Okay. Think back. Your textbooks. You probably had courses in things like statics and dynamics and strength of materials and electric circuits and DC circuit design and, thermodynamics, fluid mechanics. Think of those books. How many books had stories in them? How many books had people in them? I actually went back and looked at this. As an aero major, I ran into this concept of the Mach number. Usually when you have something about people, it's got some number associated with it. Reynolds number, Mach number, or something. There's a little asterisk in my textbook on a Mach number. In the footnote it says, Ernst Mach. He was a physicist who lived in Germany in the 1800s, and it's like 2 sentences and that's it. What a missed opportunity. There's a story there about a person, about a really important issue in history that this concept solved. That's how it started. So what Olin does, among other things, is we put people back into engineering, okay? The whole idea is that it's about people. It starts with people, and it ends with people, and it engages people, and they make something every year. The average kid who walks across the stage at Olin at commencement day has completed 25 to 35 design-build projects, has started and run a business, okay, and has worked for a corporation for a year that's paid $55,000 for the privilege of working with 2 students, or 4 students for 2 semesters, okay? Often this involves patents and new non-disclosure agreements, and they're doing extremely well when they leave in any industry. So, and I'm not suggesting that's the answer. This is what you can do through experimentation. And what other schools need to do is to experiment with the culture that you're in, with the students that you've got, using these basic ideas. So we think of Olin College as this little tugboat, okay? Higher education is this aircraft carrier, and Olin is this tugboat that's pushing at 90 degrees on the bow. Now, there's some important observations here. You don't want the aircraft carrier to follow the tugboat. That's not the point, okay? The aircraft carrier is to nudge you to think differently so that you will shift a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and that's the point. So don't follow Olin. In order to get rid of all of the basic assumptions that were the roadblocks to breakthrough thinking, our founders made sure that we do not offer tenure to anyone. All of us left a tenured position to come. We have no academic departments, which actually is a much bigger deal than not having tenure. Every student at Olin gets $100,000 in merit scholarship over the 4 years. And everything at Olin has an expiration date. And this is a really important concept, even the curriculum. And I can tell you a story about my alma mater, Caltech, in which things changed usually when somebody dies, okay? They recruit this person and they're the expert in this field until they're 90. And then when they pass, then they reevaluate to decide whether we should make some change, okay? So the curriculum has tenure. This is the problem. Okay, we influence other schools primarily through what we call the Collaboratory. The Collaboratory is an organized program where we welcome visitors from other institutions to spend some time with us to learn how to experiment in your own environment. This is just a really tiny sample of the institutions that we work with. In fact, in the last decade, we have had now nearly 900 universities and 2,800 faculty members from 65 countries. So this is the primary mission of our school, is to be a laboratory and to educate. Now, I want to talk to you about lessons learned. So we've been doing this for a decade or more. What have we learned? It could be useful. And I want to talk first about what I think of as the future of higher education. Where is it going? And you might start by thinking of the knowledge economy. There has been a great deal of emphasis on this very traditional idea that the more you know, the better your life will be, right? That's why we send our kids to school. I'll talk more about this in a minute. That turns out to be a testable hypothesis. You can go to the tax data and correlate it with what people know and find out. This is also the basis of the World Bank's plan for the developing world. Change them into a knowledge economy and everything will be fine. What is a knowledge economy? It's about education. It's about creating knowledgeable people. So the idea is that you're putting knowledge into the heads of these young people, and the most efficient way to do that is, number one, you have to have somebody that knows something to transfer the knowledge, so they need to have a PhD, right? PhD. I'm standing on a stage, okay? I'm supposed to be the expert. That's my role. You're sitting in rows. Some of you are taking notes. There'll be a test at the end. The idea is we think without even thinking about this. We imagine that school and education is about knowing things. You need an expert. You need people to sit quietly and follow. And then you know whether it works by testing what you know. So, for example, there's a TV game show in the US. Maybe you've heard about it. It's called Jeopardy! Jeopardy! Is a TV game show in which there's a master of ceremonies who has questions, and they have 3 contestants who have a little clicker, and you have to be the first to respond. These are random questions, and if you get the right answers, you win money, okay? So if the knowledge economy works perfectly, everybody in the world will do really well on Jeopardy! There's a problem with this. It's called Google. We watch this game at our home a lot, and my daughter, when she's home, often gets the answer before the person on TV because she can Google it on her phone. Think about that. That changes everything. What is the value of knowing things today? Will you get a job because you have an encyclopedic memory of random facts? Turns out the answer is no. Things have changed dramatically. There is now a wave across the world to develop a maker economy, not just a knowledge economy. These are not mutually exclusive. They both happen at the same time. And you need knowledgeable people to create things, but it's a fundamentally different motivation. And now the educational theory completely changes. It's not about putting ideas into kids' heads that they then are tested on. It's about getting kids to generate ideas, to interact with them, to create something, and to make it on their own. It's back to the self-expression thing. You don't need the teacher to be the expert. In fact, you don't even need a PhD to do this. You need a guide on the side, as it's been told, and the best organization for this is not people sitting in a row while somebody's standing up here and talking. It's about being, say, in small groups and working together collaboratively on the development of some complex issue. So, for example, you might be working together on making a robot, or maybe you'll be working together on writing a report, or maybe you'll be working together on composing some music. By the way, life is a maker project. Think about it. You don't know what the problems will be. You'll need others to guide you. You invent it as you go. This understanding how to make things is a fundamental shift in what it means to be educated. It's not about what you know, it's about what you can do with what you know. Google, probably the most selective employer, certainly in America, has way more applications for jobs in the ratio to those they actually employ than Harvard does for applicants for admission. It's much more selective. They have gone through a revolutionary change in what they look for. By the way, when I talked to their HR director recently, he told me that only 1/6 of all the new employees at Google do not have a college degree. okay? What's that about? Maybe the credential, maybe the traditional GPA and list of courses is not the most relevant preparation for the maker economy. Things are changing under our feet. This is not the end, by the way. We're headed towards what I think of as the innovation economy. The innovation economy is still fuzzy. We don't have all of the answers yet, but we know this is completely different. It's not about what you put into kids' heads, it's about what comes out. We don't know how this works. I'm not even sure you need teachers for this. Maybe peers and mentors is the most important group. How does this happen? Our best guess right now is what we're calling intrinsic motivation in design thinking. And by the way, it's what you conceive that matters. I do know this, the educational environment for the innovation economy looks much more like a kindergarten than it does a university classroom. It's quite different. This is where the world is going. By the way, we have graduates that are leaving every year. Those who our placement director tells us are prepared for the innovation economy, get jobs with starting salaries that are twice what the starting salaries are for the graduates who are prepared for the knowledge economy. This is certainly what industry is telling us they want. Okay, one set of observations. By the way, that is not new. This whole idea of the shift in education, Yeats talked about this decades and decades and decades ago. Education is not the filling of a pail, it's the lighting of a fire. And if you compare the left and the right, you can see the fire. Why education must change? Okay, we saw lots of graphs yesterday. I only have one graph, okay? I think this graph is the reason for all the other graphs. What is this graph? This is a graph of the total world population of humans throughout all of human existence. It starts 2 to 5 million years ago in the lower left. And look at this. The world population for humans was less than 1 billion people forever until around 1900 when it got to 1 billion. And then not many decades later, it was 2 billion. We're at 7 billion today. We're expecting 10 billion by the middle of the century. What does this graph mean to you? It means two things. Number one, I think every one of the grand challenges can be traced to this. This graph is going to affect our children, our grandchildren in ways that none of us ever realized before. I would say, if you talk to a historian, the spike in that curve is the fingerprints of engineering. We have made it possible for people to live longer. Remember the 1900 and 2000, the lifespan nearly doubled. Who wants to die, right? So we've made it possible to not die. And now we're working very hard to create things that everybody's going to be happy, and we're going to, even more people. That's if you talk to a historian. But what if you talk to a population biologist? They see something very different here. This is a graph that doesn't look too differently from the graph of rabbits in the outback of Australia after the wolves have been eliminated, okay? What happened to the rabbits? They're extinct in one generation. They haven't changed their instincts and their ways, and they breed themselves out of existence. This is also an existential threat, okay? We need to do something about the underlying cause for the grand challenges. We need to think of it as an engineering problem. It has to do with human behavior. So the problem is not just putting a Band-Aid on it with a new technology, creating a new iPhone, okay? It's more fundamental than that. What do we need to do to make this happen? Well, you've seen the NAE Grand Challenges. You also know about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the relationship between the two of them. There is a fundamental distinction I want to talk about, and that is the NAE Grand Challenges has led to an education program which it gives you a blueprint for how to start this conversation with young people. The UN Sustainable Development Goals not yet has any education program associated with it. These are more about research and about societal policies. They're both important, that's not that. What's different about the problems in the 21st century is that they're global in context, they're complex and they're multidisciplinary, and the unintended consequences are often more important than any of the solutions themselves that we've created. So when you have unintended consequences, it's usually because you had the wrong people in the room when you invented the technology to start with. Okay? If you have only engineers and if you have only software engineers in the room, and you invent new AI technology, don't be surprised if you start reading books that point out that children today have an obsession with gaming, and that mental health has never been a bigger problem than it is today with obsession. And that people have lost the ability to create community and to feel belonging because they're walking around looking like this all day. They're not making eye contact. They're not learning the skills of developing social, which is what we were created to do, unintended consequences. And the real problems, solutions that we're looking for in the 21st century have coupled scientific, social, economic, political, even religious dimensions to them. They start with people and they end with people. We have to broaden our context. It means we need a completely different way of thinking about education. By the way, we believe that our traditional approach to education may be preventing us from creating this kind of innovation. Let me explain. This is an adaptation of fundamental ideas that came out of the D School at Stanford in product design. But I'm thinking of this as an overlay on the map, and I haven't seen the map of UFMG, so maybe I'll use Michigan instead. If you look at the campus map for the University of Michigan, you will find there's an engineering quad. There are some buildings way up in the north. There are a bunch of them. They're kind of in a circle. And that's where you'll spend most of your time if you decide to major in engineering and science at the University of Michigan. Because the accreditation requirements say that 3/4 of all your credit hours have to be spent with people who have a PhD in STEM subjects, okay? And 1/4 of it is whatever else you do, I guess. There's also a business school at Michigan. It's at a different part of the campus. It's the green circle. And in that part of the campus, AACSB accreditation requirements tell you that you must spend half of your credit hours working with people who study things like management, organizational behavior, marketing, accounting, all of the business basics. And so the people all hang out in that circle. And whatever is left in the university, maybe around where the university library is, and that's where the people study things like psychology and art, humanities, and history, okay? And they study different things. By the way, you pick up a mindset if you sit in the classroom in these different parts of the campus, and they're very different. So if you spend your entire life, as I did as an engineering student, in the blue circle, you pick up this implicit message that the only really important problems in the world are feasibility questions, because everything we do in a STEM course is about feasibility. What do we know about whether this is possible based on the laws of nature? Because nothing happens that isn't consistent with the laws of nature. That's what we do. Every PhD that you see, all the other students are thinking of this. What's conspicuously absent are any of the other questions, okay? But we're specializing. So we would call that feasibility. On the other hand, in the business school, if you watch what's happening, they don't talk about feasibility. I know, because I have a daughter that went to the business school. She didn't have a single science course in 4 years, okay? Which is kind of interesting. They said, well, she had enough in high school. What happened in the business school is they talk about viability. What generates the revenue? What are the roadblocks from legal and political points of view? What about the original capital? How long until the rate of return exceeds what the initial investment was, and so forth? It's all about viability. But what about this desirability circle down at the bottom? What do they study in things like art and humanities and literature? I think what they study are questions that deal with the human heart, with desirability. What is it, for example, what is the meaning of love? What is the meaning of truth? What is the meaning of beauty? What is the meaning of justice? That's what they study in the red circle. I have a daughter who did that too. By the way, those are not questions that you can answer with vectors in calculus, and being really efficient at spreadsheets doesn't help you at all, turns out. Not at all. Are those relevant today? I think they're more than relevant. This is the problem. Turns out, only at the intersection of all three of those things can you find an innovation that's sustained in the world today. And innovation is, in fact, what? Innovation is the application of original idea and insights in a way that changes the way people live, okay? A really profound innovation changes the way people live so profoundly that you can't remember the way it was before it happened. My kids can't imagine how the caveman must have lived before the cell phone, okay? We can't imagine what life was like in 1900. The problem here, oh, by the way, I have a brother who's an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. He's on his fourth company. We talk about this all the time. He's also an engineer. We were trained in engineering that all of innovation comes from science and from feasibility studies. In fact, unfortunately, many university presidents think this too, that we think that innovation requires science funding and a tech research park, right? You develop these just-in-case ideas, you throw them over to the tech research park, and it turns into businesses. Somehow that magically creates jobs and new money, and so the government can send you even more money, and you're all done. So you don't even need the other circles, right? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of Facebook? What does Facebook sell? Can you hold it in your hand? Why does Facebook succeed? I believe Facebook succeeds because of the red circle. Facebook succeeds because the most important problem for teenagers in America today is loneliness. It's dislocation from family. Humans have a fundamental need. Maslow explained this really well in psychology. The most important need in everybody's life is to be the most important person in somebody else's life. And the way we do that is by telling personal stories. Remember that? The more revealing the stories, the more dangerous you feel about exposing yourself, the more likely you are to develop a bonding relationship with someone else. Facebook's promise is that you can pick your friends. It's a safe place to be open, to tell people what you really think. And boy, does it sell. A little over 10 years ago, Facebook didn't exist. Today, it's one of the largest financial engines on the world market. It was invented by engineers, not the kind of engineers in my generation who thought that everything was about making it bigger, making it faster, and with more technology. It's about people who understood people's needs. The message here is no amount of emphasis on narrow specialized courses is going to produce the innovators that we need. It's this intersection that creates the engine for change in the world today, from the grand challenges to the next technology engines. Okay, and if you think about this, and you talk to people in companies, it's not about the tech courses, all right? It's about attitudes. In fact, more often than not, your attitude determines your altitude in life, not your aptitude, okay? I have met with hundreds of employers at different universities. Olin is my fourth. I can honestly say I've never met with a corporate recruiter who told me that his primary problem was the graduates in engineering that he achieved were not adequately prepared in the technical subjects. And I don't care what university he's recruiting from. Even the least prestigious engineering schools do an excellent job of providing more than enough technical background for the work that they need to do at the bachelor's degree. What are they concerned about? They're concerned instead about their attitudes, behaviors, and motivations. This is the difference in who they employ and who continues and who gets chosen for leadership. Attitudes, behaviors, and motivations. What kind of attitudes, behaviors, and motivations? This is a partial list that we've accumulated from talking to employers. Entrepreneurial mindset. We need ethical behavior, teamwork and leadership. We need a global perspective. Interdisciplinary thinking. We need creativity and design. You've all seen this list. This is not new. It's come from lots of sources. Educate to Innovate, a national study from the Academy in the US. The Council on Competitiveness, the National Engineering Forum, talking about the capabilities of the graduates in the 21st century, the workforce. It's about these attitudes and behaviors. STEM Connector, which you may not have heard of, is a group of 6,000 corporations with a task force on the workforce capabilities of the future. You are going to have here, I didn't see him walk in, Al Bunshaft tomorrow. Al was the head of this task force of these 6,000 companies that looked at the workforce characteristics that produced this report. What did they say the #1 issues are? Employability skills. What is employability skills? It's about attitudes and behaviors. Do you know it's important to show up on time? Do you know when you tell somebody you're going to do it, that you finish it, you get it completed? This is like before calculus, right? This is missing. And of course, IBM, with the T-shaped person. They've been talking about this for 25 years. These are the issues that need to be embedded in the education for the 21st century. It's the importance of mindset. We boiled this down to 5 mindsets: a collaborative mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset, an interdisciplinary mindset, a global mindset, and an ethical or compassionate mindset. These map right on to the 5 dimensions of the Grand Challenge Scholars Program. These are attitudes and behaviors. We used to call them soft skills. They're much harder to achieve than competence in calculus. It's not just about content knowledge. Our job as educators has grown. We have the job of shaping the mindset of the next generation. This used to be off limits. Now it's central. So the first question is, what is mindset? Is it real, or is this something you read in the airport in one of these later self-help books that come and go? I was really worried about this until I ran into Carol Dweck. Has anybody heard of Carol Dweck? Carol Dweck is a psychologist at Stanford. She won the Atkinson Prize for the National Academy of Science in 2017 for her work in education of children. And this is the tip of the iceberg for a series of research projects that are going to change education in the future. What does mindset mean? Here's an example. She works with how children succeed, not how they learn. And what she found out is what they believe about themselves is a wonderful predictor for how they're going to do in school. So what is it about what they believe? What do you believe about your intelligence? Are you a smart person? Are you capable? Do you deserve to get an A in this class? Turns out there's a really simple dichotomy in the way people think about intelligence, okay? There's a large group of people who think that intelligence is inherited. It's like your eye color. It's something you got from your parents. It is what it is. It's never going to change, and that's who you're going to be. This has deep roots in psychology. Have you heard of the IQ test? Maybe you've heard of Howard Gardner at Harvard, who developed the theory of multiple intelligences because he was testing the validity of the IQ test, which turns out to be not very valid. But everybody believes in it, including school children who think that they're either smart or they're not. That's a fixed mindset. That's the red graph on this curve that you're seeing. On the other hand, children who believe in a growth mindset don't have this original belief. They feel that intelligence is like a muscle, and you can grow this with exercise. You can get better at things by practicing. Has anybody in here ever played the piano? Okay. You ever had piano lessons? Okay. Is it because you were born to be a concert pianist? It turns out, I don't care what your initial talent is in music. We know for a fact, the more you practice the piano, the better you get. Okay. Whether you're not going to be a Nobel Prize winner in physics doesn't matter. The more you experience physics, the better you get, okay? And that's what we need to be thinking about. She has a wonderful book called Mindset. She also won the Yidon Prize a year ago. I don't know if you've heard of the Yidon Prize. This is a $3.9 million prize that comes out of China for educational ideas that change the world. She's not the only one working in this area. Angela Duckworth, at the University of Pennsylvania, has talked about grit. Remember I told you that there is this basic hypothesis, the more you know, the better your life will be? Turns out somebody did the math on this. James Heckman, University of Chicago, did the analysis on that. He's a Nobel Prize winner in economics, and what he found out is not so much, okay? Knowledge doesn't correlate very well with success in life. But you know what does? Grit, determination, passion, perseverance. That really does pay off, okay? That's what Angela Duckworth does, and she's written the book. She's a disciple of James Heckman, and it's about grit and determination. So the real question is, how do we shape the mindset of the young people to understand that they can learn anything if they put their mind to it? And secondly, it's about determination and passion. That's what will change the world. So, mapping this on to the Grand Challenge Scholars Program. This was conceived in 2009. There's a picture, and if you could see it, it's really small, of the three of us who came up with this idea on stage at the Grand Challenge Summit. We actually did this on our own at Duke University in 2009. The Grand Challenges came out in 2008. Tom Katsoleas, who's now the president at the University of Connecticut, had some money at Duke to put on a big event. So we brought 1,100 people there. 450 of them were students. We had keynote speakers who were leaders in the field of many different kinds of technology talk about the future and how young people could shape it. Out of that meeting, we said, this is crazy. Look at how many people came. We need this to not just be an event that goes away. This needs to be a milestone on the change in the way we think about education going forward. Let's create, I don't know, let's call it the Grand Challenge Scholars Program, okay? And the three of us went on stage, locked arms, and said, the 3 schools that you see are going to do this. Please join us. And then we began to realize, we don't own these Grand Challenges. They actually belong to the National Academy. Maybe we should talk to them about this, okay? And we had Chuck Vest, who was the president at the time, was really supportive. And with his blessing, we began to work this into the agenda of the National Academy. It's now adopted by 75 universities globally, and it's a signature program in the National Academy, and it's really about those 5 mindsets that we were just talking about. The 5 mindsets that the Academy adopted for these are a research and discovery mindset. I mean, Rama went through these yesterday, so I won't go through them one at a time. You get the same point. We're trying to give students permission to think beyond differential equations, okay? That engineering is not just about getting an A on the test. Engineering is what you do with your life. It's bigger than you are. It's a cause. It's something that gives you purpose. This is, by the way, consistent with the WEF report on added skills for the 21st century. It's also consistent with the report you saw yesterday, Engineering of 2020. The Grand Challenge Scholars Program, let me just talk a little bit about what it is and what it is not, okay? This is not another accreditation program, okay? If you decide to do this, you're not going to get a checklist that says you have to have 3 of those, you need to have 5 of these, and we're going to come by and accredit you and make sure that it's all there. This is a movement. You and your institution have the flexibility to decide whether the students have demonstrated an interest and a commitment to this area to your satisfaction or not. We empower the deans to make those decisions. So you shape it to what your institution can do. The goal is to inspire and to change the way they think about themselves in education so they'll be interested in dedicating their life to these bigger problems. This crazy book that's here on the side, The Starfish and the Spider, is a wonderful illustration of how movements happen. We had the author of this speak at the Academy a year or 2 ago. He's a Stanford MBA who does this in industry a lot. He basically talks about many of the most successful business models in the 21st century that don't have a top-down structure with somebody that tells you what to do. Things like Wikipedia, by the way. You know, Wikipedia replaced Encyclopedia Britannica as the most authoritative and accessible encyclopedia in the world, and nobody works for it. Okay? It's volunteers who dedicate their time to make it happen. It's a movement. The idea, of course, is that we're going away from simply promoting knowledge and even skill to shaping a mindset. What's the program done? Well, it's grown dramatically. You can see 2010, when we first started. And in 2019, we're producing 848 graduates this year. And by the way, 53% of them are women. These purpose-driven initiatives in education resonate with women and underrepresented minorities at a level we've never seen in engineering education. The role of the National Academy of Engineering is really twofold. We have the strategy group that tries to think ahead and create events and opportunities that will cultivate a global movement. And then we have the talent group, which Rama heads up, which has to do with creating the talent. Without young people ready to do this, it won't matter what our great vision is for change. There are also these Grand Challenge, global Grand Challenge summits. These two were preceded in 2010 at USC, 2009 at Duke, with national Grand Challenge summits in the US. And we realized we don't own these things. These are bigger than the US. These are world issues. Our president at that point, Chuck Vest, reached out to the Chinese Academy of Sciences and the Royal Academy of Sciences in the UK. We made it a global event, and we've been rotating these. The next one of these summits is going to be next month, September, in London. So stay tuned. In 2015, the Grand Challenge program had 120 plus US engineering deans. That's 1/3 of all the engineering deans in the US. Converged in the White House with President Obama, signed a commitment to create more than 20,000 Grand Challenge scholars by the year 2025. And we're on track to make that happen with the exponential growth. It's a movement. Today, there's 75 GCS programs that are active around the world. There are 12 of them that are currently under review. Probably before the end of the year, they will join. There's another 97 of them that are exploring it. So this is doubling very quickly. And we're inviting our colleagues in Brazil to lock arms with us and to join us in creating this wave of change in engineering education. Last two slides. What do you remember about this? What is it that you should tell your spouse tonight when you talk to them about how you spent your day in this Grand Challenge thing? The Grand Challenges are mega engineering problems. They're really big. They contribute to the public understanding of engineering today because they answer what engineering is and how does engineering serve people in society. They're changing the way we think about education. Harnessing the power of emerging technology to secure the future of humanity. That's what engineering is about today. We're achieving humanity's goals through the solution of grand challenges and the cultivation of engineering talent with new aptitudes, the Grand Challenge Scholars Program. My last slide, a quote from Chuck Vest, making universities and engineering schools exciting, creative, adventurous, rigorous, demanding, and empowering milieus is much more important than specifying curricular details. Thank you.